I had been in love with Victor for a full 6 years. Later, when he broke up with his first love, I took advantage of the opportunity and stepped in. Everyone said that when a woman chases a man, it won't end well, but I didn't believe it. Until the 5th year, he went to pick up his first love and bring her back to the country. We met in the hospital. He accompanied her for examinations, and I was knocked down by him when I was alone having an operation. His first love provoked me, saying, "Why don't we make a bet? Let's see whether he'll choose you or me in the end." On that day, he didn't hesitate to abandon me. At that moment, I suddenly made a decision. If I can't warm his heart, then I won't try anymore. I don't want a man who doesn't love me. However, he said sarcastically, "Aubrey, you love me so much. You won't be able to let go." 01 After having the operation by myself, I endured the pain and called Victor with great effort. But I was accidentally knocked down by someone in the corridor. The nurse's voice came from behind. She rushed over anxiously to help me up, saying, "Has your boyfriend still not answered the phone? Really? What on earth could be so important that he doesn't even answer his girlfriend's call?" I didn't tell her that my boyfriend was accompanying his first love at that moment. It was him who knocked me down while holding someone just now. The nurse noticed my expression and became gossipy. "Don't look. Miss Miriam's overbearing CEO first love cares about her so much. It's just a small scratch, but he acts as if he wants all the doctors in the hospital to come and check on her." Laughable. The wound would have healed if it were any later. Well, it's just a little flirtatious thing between the couple, I guess. "Victor, my hand hurts a bit. Will it be okay?" Miriam's voice, Victor's first love, came from inside. How intimate she called him Victor. "They do make a good match," I said with a smile. Perhaps having heard the voices outside the door, Victor turned his head. But I had already turned my back to him and left, so I didn't see what his expression was like. However, I took out my phone and sent him of 102. The first time I sent a number was when Victor stood me up for the 5th time. He asked me what it meant. I covered the pain in my heart and joked with him that his original score with me was 100 points, and every time he hurt me, I would deduct 1 point. Until I deducted all the points, I would let him go. He stared at me blankly for a long time and then said coldly that I was childish and boring. I shamelessly went forward and hugged him, saying that hurting me would only deduct 1 point, but if he treated me a bit better, I would add a lot of points. For example, if he cooked a meal for me, I would add 5 points. If he accompanied me on a trip, I would add 10 points. If I was sick and he accompanied me in the hospital, I would add 20 points. If he didn't have time to accompany me but still brought me some fruit, I would add 5 points. I deducted points one by one and added them in bunches. However, 3 years had passed, and now Victor only had 9 points left with me. His call popped up on my phone. When I answered it, I asked him, "Where are you?" After a moment of silence, he replied, "At the company." What's the matter? He was lying. He was clearly accompanying his first love to see a doctor. Even the TV in the hospital was showing the scene of him and his first love appearing at the airport. The title was, "The Youngest Movie Queen, Miriam, Returns to the Country After Finishing Her Studies. The Overbearing CEO Escorts His First Love All the Way." I smiled and said, "Victor, telling one lie will require countless lies to cover it up." He said, "Boring," and hung up the phone. I was thinking that from today on, I would gradually let him go. 03 That night, I hired a caregiver to look after me and didn't go home. I was woken up by a phone call in a daze. It was from Victor. "You're not at home?" I replied with a my voice a bit hoarse. He said, "Okay," and hung up the phone. He didn't even ask where I was. He had always been like this towards me. I touched the needle for the infusion on my hand and felt that the needle wasn't stuck in the back of my hand but in my heart. It was me who pulled him out of the grief of being dumped. It was me who accompanied him through the dark days. I thought that sincerity could be exchanged for sincerity, but I still lost. 04 I was discharged from the hospital a week later. When I got back, I started packing my luggage. After living together for a year, Victor's house was filled with my things. When I first moved in, it was cold and impersonal inside. Because of my job, I could always find some rare and interesting things wherever I went. In the living room were the so-called treasure map that I bought from a small vendor in the UK, the Van Gogh ornaments that I brought back from the Netherlands, and the coins that I picked up from the wishing pool in Prague. On the dining table were the Murano glass cups that I bought in Italy and the handmade plates that I brought from Kenya. In the bathroom was the fruit diffuser that I carried back from Australia. Victor's house was too big, and I had too many things. Moving them all out was a huge task. After thinking about it, I decided to start with the dining room and the kitchen. When I walked into the kitchen, strangely enough, I felt something was wrong. The house was cleaned by an aunt every day, so it was clean and tidy. But it was just my woman's sixth sense acting up. I opened the refrigerator. And I saw a bag of brown sugar. I would have menstrual cramps from time to time during my period. Although it was a bit uncomfortable, I never drank brown sugar water. Also at this time, I heard some noise in the living room. When I walked out, Victor, whom I hadn't seen for a long time, appeared in front of me. But behind him was another woman. She was wearing his suit, and she was soaked through. 05 It seemed that he didn't expect that I would show up today. Victor's gaze lingered on me for a moment, and then he said coldly, finally decided to come back. You didn't send a single message in all these days, Aubrey. You had a great time outside, huh? For a moment I felt like laughing. He had ignored all the messages and calls I sent him. Since that late-night call from him he had never asked me where I was again. He was so meticulous in business, but as long as he opened my WeChat moments he would find that I hadn't gone on any collecting trips recently, because I would post photos when I went on collecting trips. But he didn't have time to ask because he was busy making brown sugar water for his first love and also busy taking her home to take a shower. In the standoff, Miriam slowly walked up to him and said, Miss Aubrey, don't misunderstand. I was filming a rain scene nearby and happened to meet Mr. Victor, who came to visit the set. This place is close to the filming community, and he just brought me here to change clothes. There were 3 key points in one sentence. Victor knew her whereabouts, went to visit the set, and even felt sorry for her getting wet and took her away from the set. I smiled and looked at Victor. President Victor is really such a kind-hearted person. You're so concerned about your ex-girlfriend's affairs. Miriam was about to speak but I interrupted her. Was there no hotel that caught Miss Miriam's eye? Why did you have to come to your ex-boyfriend's house to change clothes? Don't you think it's rather interesting? I'm sorry. I was just afraid of being photographed by paparazzi at that time and didn't think too much. Indeed, I shouldn't have come. Miss Aubrey, please don't be angry with Mr. Victor because of me. I'll leave now. As if remembering something, she took off the suit and handed it to Victor, patted her head, and said, Oh, I forgot that I left a bag of brown sugar here the day before yesterday. I'll take it with me too. Obviously, she was showing weakness and speaking so frankly. But I saw the blatant provocation and show of strength in her eyes, which made it seem that I was the petty one deliberately making things difficult for her. I forced a smile and said, Don't. I'm just back at the wrong time and have disturbed you too. I was about to turn around and leave when Victor grabbed my wrist. He lowered his voice and sounded rather impatient. You just got back. What are you making a fuss about now? What was I making a fuss about? Victor looked down at me condescendingly, but his fingers slowly tightened, squeezing my wrist until it hurt. I tried to struggle. Let go. You're hurting me. But he held on tighter and tighter, and even my skin started to turn red. Aubrey, I don't want to quarrel with you. I and her. Before he could finish his words, Miriam suddenly said, Victor, then I'll leave first. Thanks to your investment in this drama, I'll treat you to dinner next time. Oh, so he had been busy investing in his first love's drama during this period, afraid that she would be bullied. I thought to myself, Victor, this is the 3rd time you've hurt my heart today. While he was in a daze, I pulled my hand away from his and looked at him calmly. President Victor has devoted all his time to his first love. Why did you suddenly remember that you still have a girlfriend? Victor, you accompanied me to see the old Chinese doctor for my hand before. Could you just give me his contact information? I'll go by myself next time and won't trouble you. Oh, the 4th time. Victor frowned and irritably felt in the pockets of his suit. The more he felt, the more annoyed he became. He couldn't find the old Chinese doctor's business card for a long time. Miriam just watched quietly, with a smile in her eyes. Don't worry. Otherwise give it to me next time. I'm a bit cold. I'll catch a cold if I don't leave soon. As soon as she finished speaking, she sneezed. What good acting skills. But it still deceived Victor. He put the suit back on her. Cover up. I'll take you there first. The 5th time. A dense pain spread through my heart. Even the wound on my stomach felt a bit uncomfortable, as if being pulled. I covered it with my hand, went to the coffee table to look for the medicine prescribed by the doctor, and swallowed it with mineral water. In the blink of an eye when I came to my senses, Victor was already standing in front of me. He snatched the pill from my hand and looked at it. Amoxicillin? What's wrong with you? I had an operation and I'm feeling really uncomfortable. Is that not okay? Aubrey, what on earth are you angry about with me? He seemed to have reached the limit of his patience. His voice was low and hoarse. You've been like a powder keg since you came back. What kind of operation could you have had? You're the kind of person who would make a big fuss over a small injury. Don't try to get my attention and make me feel sorry for you again. I slowly closed my eyes. I really felt so tired at that moment. Victor, the director is urging me. Miriam's soft and delicate voice came again, interrupting my words. Victor looked back and forth between me and her, and still chose to go to her. Before leaving, he said, wait for me to come back at home. The words that I was about to say were swallowed back hard. I didn't respond to him. I just suddenly felt that it was so meaningless. Victor, 6 points deducted today. You only have 3 points left. I hired a housekeeping company to help. There were so many things that it took nearly 4 hours to clean them all up. And as for the so-called filming nearby, could it really take so long to go back and forth? At the last moment, I looked at the photos placed in the bedroom. That was a photo of me and Victor taken on the mountaintop. We were wearing windbreakers, and I was leaning on his shoulder, looking rather silly with a big smile. Actually, it wasn't all bad memories. In the second month after we confirmed our relationship, I went to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa by myself to touch the last snow on the equator. Because it was predicted that the glaciers would disappear in 2025. As a photographer, I immediately flew there with my camera on my back. I took the mock-aim route. Everyone around me was traveling in groups, but I was alone. When I was about to set off, I saw Victor walking towards me in a windbreaker. At dawn that day, the early morning mist and the familiar figure of him made my heart tremble. I had always been carefree and independent since I was a child, but at that moment, I suddenly felt that it might be nice to have someone by my side. We climbed along this route for 7 days. Victor often exercised and had good physical strength, so he often pulled me along as we went up. The temperature difference between day and night was large. In the tent, he also used his own body temperature to keep me warm. When I was leaning in his arms, I asked him, "Victor, why did you come?" He said, "There's no particular reason. I saw that you were coming and then I wanted to come too." I smiled, feeling as if I had finally seen the light at the end of the tunnel. When we climbed to the top of the mountain, the magnificent and breathtaking scenery came into view. I was out of breath but felt extremely lighthearted. At my feet was the white snow that I could touch, and in the distance were the leaping red flames. And beside me was the person I had liked for so many years. That moment was so beautiful, really. I couldn't control my heartbeat at all and shouted towards the clouds, "Victor, I really, really like you." When I turned my head, I saw a slight change in his eyes, with emotion surging in them. I smiled at him, but suddenly he grabbed my hand and pulled me in front of him. Then came the soft touch of his lips. That was my first kiss and also the first time we kissed. It tasted sweet. But after we got back, he seemed to change again. He told me that he wasn't a good person and didn't want to hold me back, and then he broke up with me. Of course, I tried to persuade him to stay, saying that I wasn't as good as he thought either, and that 2 negatives might make a positive. There were also some sweet moments later. Victor was always like this. Every time I was on the verge of giving up, he would give me a little bit of sweetness. It made me constantly fall into the internal struggle of, he loves me, he doesn't love me, wasting day after day. It also gradually wore away my obsession with him. I sighed, picked up the photo, tore it up, and threw it into the trash can. 08 I was woken up by his call the next day. "Aubrey, where are your things at home?" There was actually a bit of panic in his voice. My sleepiness disappeared, and I checked the time. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. In other words, he didn't go back home yesterday, and only found out that I wasn't there today. My mother used to say that don't make any decisions when you're emotional. So I softened my tone and replied, "Victor, I think we need to calm down now and separate for a while." "What do you mean by separating for a while?" He, who had always been calm and composed, now had a barely detectable tremor in his voice. "What do you mean now? Do you want to break up?" I paused for a moment. According to past situations, the next second he should have said, "If you insist on this, then let's break up." It seemed that he didn't know how to coax people and always showed me his toughest side. But unexpectedly, this time I heard him say, "Aubrey, you love me so much. You won't be able to let go." He was so confident of winning. "What happened yesterday was an accident. Don't overthink it. Where are you? I'll come and pick you up." I found it a bit funny. "Victor, you told me to wait for you at home yesterday. Then where did you go? Did you tell me? Or do you think that with just one word from you, I'll always stay where I am and obediently wait for you to come back? What's the difference between not fulfilling a promise and lying?" On the other end of the phone, he was silent for a while and then began to explain, "There was a business dinner yesterday, and I couldn't get away." "Are you sure you couldn't get away because of the business dinner or because there was someone you cared about at the dinner?" I had already seen the Weibo post by Miriam. "The atmosphere under the street lamp tonight is so charming." The attached picture was a street view under a street lamp. And the car hood that was accidentally shown in the picture was Victor's car. The time when the post was sent was 4 o'clock in the morning. At 4 o'clock in the morning, my boyfriend was sending his first love home. And then he asked me to wait for him at home, but he didn't come back all night. Isn't it funny? Netizens are like detectives and left comments one after another. I magnified it with a microscope. The person in the car is the overbearing CEO's first love at the airport. Whoa, it's so sweet. I've already imagined 100 chapters of the plot in my mind. Is there anyone who can find out who this big shot is? The side face with his head down when he picked someone up at the airport and the atmosphere of smoking in the car in the early morning are really amazing. Suppressing the discomfort in my heart, I thought of the past. Victor had also picked me up before. In the second year when we were together, I traveled all over the place for a photography exhibition. Coincidentally, I encountered unrest and a terrorist attack. I hid in a dilapidated house with stray bullets near my feet. It was the first time that I felt so scared. But I didn't dare to go out and quietly waited for the rescue from the embassy, fearing that I would lose my life if I went out. After huddling in the corner and waiting for a few hours, my phone rang and the name that popped up on it was Victor. Later, he found me and held my hand to escape from that dilapidated and smoky place. He said that he happened to be in the neighboring city for work that day. The location I sent him was on his phone. Although he didn't reply, he came to look for me immediately after hearing the news. Aren't you afraid of danger? I'm more afraid of my girlfriend's safety. Sitting in the car, I remembered that scene and was indeed a bit touched and fell for him deeper. I held his hand and rubbed it gently. I didn't expect that you would come. He pinched my face. Then who did you expect to come? I just smiled and hugged him tightly. At that moment, I was looking forward to our future. Victor's voice came from beside my ear. Aubrey, I don't want to quarrel with you because of Miriam. My heart sank to the bottom. Victor, I'm also quite tired. Let's just leave it like this. Just like this. I began to slowly let you go. 09 After that day, Victor and I fell into a cold war. I no longer cared about his every move, no longer sent messages to share every little thing with him, and no longer went back to the home we shared. Before, when I wanted to see him, we would run into each other everywhere. Now that I took the initiative to draw a clear line, I found that life without him was just SOSO. There was no movement on my side. But Miriam was quite active. She really treated Weibo as her WeChat moments to post things. Of course, the content she posted each time was ambiguous, leaving people with wild imaginations. And the main character was my boyfriend who hadn't broken up with me yet. That day, I was invited to a photography exhibition, but I didn't expect to meet Victor there. Of course, Miriam was there too. They were really inseparable. I just took a quick glance and then quickly looked away. Strangely enough, that sour and swollen feeling in my heart didn't arise this time. That I went to greet and chat with the people I knew and just ignored them. Several times, my friends said to me, your boyfriend has been looking at you. What's going on? Did you two have a fight? I thought for a moment and chose my words carefully. Or we're in a cooling off period before breaking up, I guess. Really? You've liked him for so many years. Are you really breaking up just like that? Yes, the obsession that had lasted for so many years might suddenly disappear in just a moment. 10 While I was enjoying the breeze on the balcony, Victor came to me on his own. We just happened to meet, not came here together. Yeah. He paused for a moment and wanted to reach out and pull me. After so many days, you've been angry long enough. It's time to go home, right? Don't touch me. Really, I felt disgusted. Victor's hand froze in midair, and his face didn't look good. After all, he was a favored son of heaven. After all, in this relationship, I was always the one who compromised and showed weakness. Aubrey, I have nothing to do with her. You're already my girlfriend. There's really no need to put on a defensive posture as if I'm some kind of heinous person, and there's no need to target her. Target her? As if seeing the confusion on my face, he said, your uncle owns M Weekly. She clearly said she wanted to be on it, but suddenly was told that there was already a suitable person. Aubrey, I always thought you could separate work and life very well. Oh, he's come to defend his first love. Suddenly, I felt that my heart, which had been calm, was stabbed for no reason again. How many points did he have left? 2 points. Victor, it wasn't me. I pressed my hand against my heart. I don't have that much energy to make things difficult for an insignificant person. It's beneath me. There was a moment of panic on his face. He moved his lips and said, I'm sorry. I interrupted him and left. There's no need to apologize. I don't care. Since he could ask that question, I had no more expectations for him. On the open-air lawn, Miriam held a wine glass and slowly looked at me, saying, no matter what I want, Victor will give it to me. He will take care of me for a lifetime. You're just a thief. You've stolen our 5 years. Since you've stolen something, you should give it back. I smiled and said, he already has a girlfriend. Are all the men in the world dead? Do you have to like someone else's boyfriend? Besides, we had a proper relationship. I haven't broken up with him yet. You're the third party here. She covered her mouth and chuckled softly. The one who isn't loved is the third party. He and I had the joys of our youth. We witnessed each other's first love in our youthful days. It was a case of unrequited love and now getting back together. What do you have? Aren't you just pestering him relentlessly and taking advantage of the opportunity because of your status? Why don't we make a bet? Let's see whether he'll choose you or me in the end. I was tired of it. I was tired of this kind of drama of competing for a man. I put down my glass and was about to leave. She came forward and grabbed my hand. The moment I pulled my hand back, Miriam fell down. It was a fake fall. What are you doing? It was Victor's voice from behind. She had planned this all along. From this angle, it really seemed that I had pushed her away. The glass shattered on the ground, and the hand that she had always cherished was pressed on the broken pieces. She was really tough on herself. I suddenly laughed. I felt extremely bored. Victor walked over and helped Miriam up. She pretended to be strong. I didn't stand firmly. I'm sorry. It has nothing to do with Miss Aubrey, Victor. Don't make things difficult for her. How ironic. My boyfriend's ex-girlfriend was asking my boyfriend not to make things difficult for me. Victor had a cold expression. He stared at her hand, took out a tissue, and carefully wiped it for her. Then, as if remembering something, he looked at me indifferently. Aubrey, apologize to her. After all, she got hurt because of you. My fault? Miriam looked at me with a triumphant expression, and her lips moved as if to say, I win. I stared at Victor fixedly and felt a sourness rising in my nose. I tried my best to hold back my tears. I smiled at him and said, apologize? You're dreaming. Then I pinched the palm of my hand hard, thinking to myself, Aubrey, you must maintain your dignity. I looked at him and said, Victor, you only have 1 point left. 12. I heard footsteps behind me. Victor caught up with me, took my hand, and found an empty room. He pinned me between him and the door, the corners of his eyes slightly red. What do you mean by only having 1 point? I had told him about it before, but he had never taken it seriously. The remaining points were deducted in just a few days. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he reached out and lifted my chin. Our breaths intertwined. Although it was an ambiguous atmosphere, I felt extremely disgusted. I pushed him away and slapped him, my voice choked with sobs. When have I, Aubrey, ever suffered such humiliation? I had been pampered since I was a child, and everyone loved me. But I stumbled again and again because of Victor and lost all my pride. Victor, I really don't want to like you anymore. My whole heart had been shattered by him. You've made me so uncomfortable. I covered my chest. I don't want you anymore. Don't cry, okay? It makes me even more uncomfortable to see you cry. He hugged me tightly, pressed me into his arms, and tremblingly reached out to wipe my tears. But the more he wiped, the more tears flowed. I pinched my thigh hard, dodged his hand, and broke free from his embrace. Victor, you really don't have to disgust me like this. If you two want to rekindle your old flame, you can wait until we break up. I didn't break up with her gracefully back then, and she got hurt because of me. After all, I owe her. Victor frowned slightly. She and I are in the past. I don't want anything to do with her. But you've favored her time and time again and chosen her time and time again. Doesn't that represent your thoughts? Victor, you're really a scumbag for toying with 2 women like this. He choked a little. Apart from some cooperation, I haven't done anything inappropriate with her. Aubrey, don't be unreasonable. 13. Am I being unreasonable? So, will you take care of her whenever she has something to ask you in the future? Yes. I looked straight into his eyes. Oh, then, Mr. Victor, for how long will you take care of her? If she needs me and it's within my ability, I'll take care of her. Okay, I understand that you want to take care of her for a lifetime. Is that right? Victor didn't answer. He just looked a bit irritable and tugged at his tie. Aubrey, I don't want to make meaningless explanations about this matter. As my girlfriend, you should believe that I'm a person with principles and won't do anything out of line. You want me to believe you, but have you ever believed me? I was on the verge of laughing and crying. Victor, don't you think your excuse is lame? Did she save your life? Why are you treating her like this? Or is it because 5 years have passed and you still can't let her go? He raised his head, his eyes unfathomable but full of impatience. I've already made it clear that she and I are in the past. Why have you been clinging to this matter today? Have you had enough of making a fuss? I sniffed and raised my head to prevent my tears from falling. I've had enough. So, Victor, we break up. It wasn't a question or a test. It was a statement. This was the first time I mentioned breaking up. And it was also the last time. The points were deducted just now. Victor, I don't want you anymore. His expression seemed to freeze at that moment. Then there was disbelief. Break up? Aubrey, you're not a child anymore. You should consider the consequences when you say you want to break up. When he mentioned breaking up with me before, why didn't he consider the consequences? He was so sure that I would definitely try to persuade him to stay. What a double standard. I looked at the face that I had loved for decades and smiled. Victor, I've been obsessed with you since I was a child. I liked you as if I was bewitched. Later, I finally waited until you broke up with her, and then I chased you for 2 years before you agreed. We were together for 3 years, over 1,000 days. You mentioned breaking up with me 5 times, and I tried to persuade you to stay every time. But, Victor, it's not like I'll wait for you at the same place forever just because you turn around. A person's heart doesn't turn cold in a day. Whatever. Victor tore off his tie and sat on the sofa irritably. Just don't regret it. I opened the door. On that day, reason prevailed, and I didn't look back even once. I didn't stand firmly. I'm sorry. It has nothing to do with Miss Aubrey, Victor. Don't make things difficult for her. How ironic. My boyfriend's ex-girlfriend was asking my boyfriend not to make things difficult for me. Victor had a cold expression. He stared at her hand, took out a tissue, and carefully wiped it for her. Then, as if remembering something, he looked at me indifferently. Aubrey, apologize to her. After all, she got hurt because of you. My fault? Miriam looked at me with a triumphant expression, and her lips moved as if to say, I win. I stared at Victor fixedly and felt a sourness rising in my nose. I tried my best to hold back my tears. I smiled at him and said, apologize? You're dreaming. Then I pinched the palm of my hand hard, thinking to myself, Aubrey, you must maintain your dignity. I looked at him and said, Victor, you only have 1 point left. 12. I heard footsteps behind me. Victor caught up with me, took my hand, and found an empty room. He pinned me between him and the door, the corners of his eyes slightly red. What do you mean by only having 1 point? I had told him about it before, but he had never taken it seriously. The remaining points were deducted in just a few days. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he reached out and lifted my chin. Our breaths intertwined. Although it was an ambiguous atmosphere, I felt extremely disgusted. I pushed him away and slapped him, my voice choked with sobs. When have I, Aubrey, ever suffered such humiliation? I had been pampered since I was a child, and everyone loved me. But I stumbled again and again because of Victor and lost all my pride. Victor, I really don't want to like you anymore. My whole heart had been shattered by him. You've made me so uncomfortable. I covered my chest. I don't want you anymore. Don't cry, okay? It makes me even more uncomfortable to see you cry. He hugged me tightly, pressed me into his arms, and tremblingly reached out to wipe my tears. But the more he wiped, the more tears flowed. I pinched my thigh hard, dodged his hand, and broke free from his embrace. Victor, you really don't have to disgust me like this. If you two want to rekindle your old flame, you can wait until we break up. I didn't break up with her gracefully back then, and she got hurt because of me. After all, I owe her. Victor frowned slightly. She and I are in the past. I don't want anything to do with her. But you've favored her time and time again and chosen her time and time again. Doesn't that represent your thoughts? Victor, you're really a scumbag for toying with 2 women like this. He choked a little. Apart from some cooperation, I haven't done anything inappropriate with her. Aubrey, don't be unreasonable. 13. Am I being unreasonable? So, will you take care of her whenever she has something to ask you in the future? Yes. I looked straight into his eyes. Oh, then, Mr. Victor, for how long will you take care of her? If she needs me and it's within my ability, I'll take care of her. Okay, I understand that you want to take care of her for a lifetime. Is that right? Victor didn't answer. He just looked a bit irritable and tugged at his tie. Aubrey, I don't want to make meaningless explanations about this matter. As my girlfriend, you should believe that I'm a person with principles and won't do anything out of line. You want me to believe you, but have you ever believed me? I was on the verge of laughing and crying. Victor, don't you think your excuse is lame? Did she save your life? Why are you treating her like this? Or is it because 5 years have passed and you still can't let her go? He raised his head, his eyes unfathomable but full of impatience. I've already made it clear that she and I are in the past. Why have you been clinging to this matter today? Have you had enough of making a fuss? I sniffed and raised my head to prevent my tears from falling. I've had enough. So, Victor, we break up. It wasn't a question or a test. It was a statement. This was the first time I mentioned breaking up. And it was also the last time. The points were deducted just now. Victor, I don't want you anymore. His expression seemed to freeze at that moment. Then there was disbelief. Break up? Aubrey, you're not a child anymore. You should consider the consequences when you say you want to break up. When he mentioned breaking up with me before, why didn't he consider the consequences? He was so sure that I would definitely try to persuade him to stay. What a double standard. I looked at the face that I had loved for decades and smiled. Victor, I've been obsessed with you since I was a child. I liked you as if I was bewitched. Later, I finally waited until you broke up with her, and then I chased you for 2 years before you agreed. We were together for 3 years, over 1,000 days. You mentioned breaking up with me 5 times, and I tried to persuade you to stay every time. But Victor, it's not like I'll wait for you at the same place forever just because you turn around. A person's heart doesn't turn cold in a day. Whatever. Victor tore off his tie and sat on the sofa irritably. Just don't regret it. I opened the door. On that day, reason prevailed, and I didn't look back even once. 14. Perhaps I had already expected that there would be a day when we broke up, so I wasn't as sad as I thought I would be. Those disappointments, regrets, and unwillingness had become immune after being hurt time and time again. It's just that the love was real, the breakup was real, and the relationship between our 2 families wasn't fake either. After my parents came back from their around-the-world trip, they were invited by the neighbor aunt to have a barbecue on the lawn. I went there, and I also expected that Victor's family would come too. He seemed to have lost some weight. The dark circles under his eyes were obvious, and he didn't seem as energetic as before. When he saw me, he opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. I had already taken my mother's hand and gone outside to help. During the barbecue, he grilled my favorite dishes several times and handed them to me. I didn't take them. I pretended not to see them. The atmosphere was lively, and no one noticed the undercurrents between him and me. After drinking a few glasses of wine, an aunt asked me with a smile, "Aubrey and Victor have been in a relationship for a few years. When are you planning to get married?" I paused while eating and looked up to see Victor looking at me expectantly. I looked away and smiled at the aunt. "We have incompatible personalities. We broke up some time ago." The aunt's smile froze on her face. Victor's eyes instantly looked dejected. My mother held my hand tightly under the table and changed the topic. Later, the adults went to have fun and let us youngsters play by ourselves. I didn't want to see him and planned to go home. But he still stopped me and said, "Aubrey, I miss you so much." 15 The sentence, "I miss you so much," had always seemed very romantic to me. I didn't expect that one day when I heard it, I would feel a bit uncomfortable. Perhaps it was because it came at the wrong time and without a good reason. "Victor, I really wanted to hear you say, 'I miss you so much, I love you so much,' from your mouth before. But you were always so stingy with your words. After expecting something for too long, I don't even have the thought of wanting it anymore." He frowned slightly and explained, "No, I'm just like this by nature. I'm not good at expressing myself." I smiled gently. "Have you heard a saying? If you really like someone, the feelings in your eyes can't be hidden. You may be cold or not good at expressing love, but your actions won't lie. I just sometimes don't know how to respond to your enthusiasm. I know what kind of person I am. I was afraid that you would get hurt, so I mentioned breaking up. I didn't want to hold you back." I shook my head. "No, you're used to being in the dominant position in a relationship. You're used to me liking you without getting anything in return. You're not that you don't understand. You're calculating gains and losses. Whether you love me or not depends on your mood. If you didn't understand, how could you show favoritism to others?" 16 If it's because of Miriam's matter, I can explain. He stared at me silently. "But I don't want to hear it anymore." He was choked by my words but still said, "When we were young, I planned to start my own business without relying on my family. At that time, I needed a sum of funds for investment. She helped me get the investment but then got into a car accident and hurt her hand. The doctor said her right hand was ruined. So I couldn't just ignore her. So that's how it was." I thought it was really funny. I even laughed until I cried. Victor frowned as he looked at me. "Don't you believe me?" He wanted to reach out and wipe my tears, but I had already wiped them away myself. "Victor, it was I who went to Uncle Huang to ask for the investment for you. Of course, I knew that he was starting a business. I also knew that he had a girlfriend at that time, so I just thought about doing something for him and just watching him from afar. Uncle Huang had some acquaintance with our family. Coincidentally, he was interested in photography at that time, so I accompanied him to dozens of countries to take landscape photos. I remember once we were chased by a lion on the African savannah, and our lives were in danger. After returning to China, he sighed and asked me, 'Is it worth it for that guy? You're not even his girlfriend. Why are you doing all these things?' I smiled foolishly, thinking that it didn't matter. If you like someone, you're willing to pay for them silently." Uncle Huang finally agreed to invest in Victor. It was the money that saved Victor's life. I was so happy that day that I drank a few more glasses. Who would have known that unfortunately, I encountered a robbery? After all, a pretty girl who was drunk was indeed an easy target. I had practiced taekwondo since I was a child to protect myself. Although I got stabbed in the thigh, the robbers didn't fare any better either. After reporting to the police and giving my statement, I went to the hospital by myself to get stitches. I didn't tell anyone. Even when I was with Victor later, I never mentioned it. I thought it wasn't really a big deal. Besides, I'm not the kind of person who likes to show off. However, I didn't expect that it gave Miriam, that thief, an opportunity to win Victor's sympathy. After hearing what I said, Victor's expression was beyond description. He went to pick her up and bring her back to the country, invested in her, cared about her hand, and fulfilled her little requests, all because he wanted to make it up to her. In the end, he only found out that he had repaid the wrong person's kindness. As smart as Victor was, why didn't he think about it? She was just a college student at that time. How could she have any acquaintance with Uncle Huang, such a big entrepreneur, that she could get him to invest with just one word? It was just that the filter of first love was too thick, so he was easily deceived. After a long while, he managed to find his voice with difficulty. "Why didn't you tell me? Even if I had told you, could it have changed anything? Even if I had told you, would you have believed me? And could you guarantee that as long as something happened to her, you would abandon her and choose me?" "Victor, I brought up this matter today not because I wanted to get your belated affection from you, but because I wanted to draw a clear line with you once and for all." He still wanted to say something. I gently lifted my skirt, revealing the scar on the outside of my thigh. That's why when we were close before, I always didn't like to turn on the lights, and I stopped wearing hot pants and short skirts. See? This is the proof that I loved you. Of course, it's also the mark of the hurt I suffered because of you. I will remember it at every moment in the future. And then tell myself. The scars will always be there, and no matter how hard you try to make up for them, it won't work. 17 That day, Victor left in a daze. In the evening, I sent my father away and huddled in my mother's arms. She hugged me and asked, after chasing him for so many years, have you really decided to give up? I nodded. It seemed that in just a moment, I suddenly felt that it was rather meaningless. Those obsessions, those unwillingness were finally filled with disappointment. And then Miriam's appearance became the last straw that broke the camel's back. I just felt that he was nothing special after all. At that time I was so determined to be with him, thinking that I couldn't let myself have any regrets. And I did act accordingly. I don't regret choosing to take that step to chase him. Compared to regretting in the future for not getting the love I wanted, it's better to give it a try to see if there's any possibility. So what if I lost the bet? I have the capital to afford to lose. I can also afford to love, let go, and be worthy of anyone. Yes, you wouldn't turn back until you hit the wall. You've been like this since you were a child. I joked, ordinary parents would definitely persuade their daughters not to chase after boys. Why didn't you persuade me back then? My mother patted my head. Would you have listened if I had persuaded you? But Mom always thought that you were still young. It's normal for young people to get hurt a little. It's not such a terrible thing. It's just a breakup. Besides, all the experiences you encounter are part of life. Experiences will enrich your life experience, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I sighed. It's just that there wasn't a good ending. What's a good ending? Is being together a good ending? My dear daughter, realizing your mistake and turning back is also a good ending. Knowing how to let go is also a good ending. You're still young. There will always be someone who loves you deeply. The past has never been your shadow. It's a rich treasure that belongs only to you. As long as you find the right way to face it, you will grow and transform. I finally understood that true strength is not about confrontation, but about allowing things to happen, allowing regrets, follies, ugliness, and hypocrisy, and allowing efforts without rewards. Life is like 10,000 times of beautiful spring days. Only by breaking out of the cocoon can a butterfly welcome its new life. I've let go of Victor. 18 However, it was rare to see the scene where Miriam made a huge blunder and was ridiculed by the whole internet. The reason was that she posted a Weibo message, I know you'll always be by my side. The whole internet thought that something good was about to happen, and they all went to the official Weibo account of Victor's company to ask the boss to claim his future wife. But before long, the official Weibo account issued a lawyer's letter, stating that their boss already had a girlfriend and wasn't familiar with her. Then they withdrew the investment and resources given to her. And it also said that a thief didn't deserve it. Some passersby flooded into her comment section, scolding her for being delusional and saying that she knew she was the third party but still did what she did. Of course, some people also scolded Victor for being disgusting, having a girlfriend but still being ambiguous with his first love. I used to disdain to argue with a little star. But now I don't think so. I had recorded the audio when I met her before, and I also turned on the video when she framed me at the photography exhibition. I asked someone to help me send all these out. And I also issued a statement that I had broken up with Victor and asked people not to mention it. All of a sudden, it caused a huge stir on the internet, and Miriam was directly blocked and disappeared as if she had never existed. And the stock price of Victor's company was also greatly affected. 19 However, unexpectedly, Victor started to haunt me again. He came to me and said that as long as it could make me a little happier, he didn't care if he lost his company. Then he began to follow the path that I had walked for him before, saying good morning and good night every day, reporting his itinerary to me, cooking for me and bringing it to my studio, staying far behind me when I was working, and putting a water cup in my hand as soon as I coughed. He said, Aubrey, is there still a chance for me to earn points? Well, after we broke up, he started to take my words seriously, comparing with the bonus items that I had told him before. He did things for me. There were actually many chances before. I didn't say anything. Essentially, I was also in a mindset of watching a show, wondering how long he could persevere. 3 months passed like this. He persisted regardless of wind or rain, while I completely ignored him. That day, after the photography exhibition ended, I took my friends to a party. He was waiting for me in the lobby from a distance. Someone asked me, Sister Aubrey, President Victor seems rather pitiful. Should we ask him to come over? I looked at him. The always high and mighty Victor actually had such a dejected look. Perhaps seeing my gaze, he smiled at me faintly. Then he lowered his head and sent me a message. I've already got more than 100 points. Can you give me another chance? No. I just felt it was strange that when a boy regrets and pretends to be affectionate for a while, girls will say he's pitiful and feel sorry for him. But what about the true feelings that we once gave? Why is there no one feeling sorry for them? If we turn back, will we be worthy of the once humble self who begged for love? 20 After the party that day, I stood alone on the top of a tall building and looked down. Victor appeared behind me and handed me a cup of yogurt. He knew that I usually didn't eat much and was used to having a cup of yogurt at night. You see, he actually wasn't completely unaware of what his girlfriend wanted. He was just too lazy to do it, didn't want to do it, and just comfortably enjoyed the preference that you gave him. He was reluctant to give a little. Aubrey, I really love you and really don't want to break up with you. I didn't take the yogurt from him. I turned my head and looked at him quietly, and then smiled softly. Do you not want to break up with me, or are you reluctant to part with the feeling of having me around you all the time? I had liked him since I was a child and had always followed his footsteps. As long as he turned around, I was there. He mentioned breaking up many times to test my love for him, and I always tried to persuade him to stay. So he was certain that I couldn't leave him. Unexpectedly, one day I took the initiative to break up, completely disappeared from his life, stopped contacting him, stopped caring about him, and stopped centering my life around him. So he panicked. No, Aubrey. In these past few months, I've thought about my feelings for you every night. Only then did I realize that I had already fallen in love with you long ago. Trying to make up for it isn't because I feel not reconciled, nor because you don't revolve around me anymore. It's really because I don't want to lose you. I looked out of the window. Now you say you like me and love me. Perhaps it's just that you've gotten used to having me around in these past few years. Maybe it's your possessiveness at work. Maybe there's also a bit of love in it. But Victor, I gave you chances before. You still hurt me again and again. Those points seemed to remind you to treat me better, but in fact, they were just reminding me that my obsession also had a countdown. I'm not calculating whether you're good or bad to me. That would be too tiring. I just wanted to remind myself that in this relationship, no matter how much I might lose myself, there should still be a limit. But when you do something wrong, there's always a chance to make up for it, isn't there? He stood in front of me, looking at me. Not everyone in this world can avoid making mistakes. I made a mistake, and I'll correct it. I shook my head. Only in matters of feelings, it's not like you can start over just because you correct your mistakes. He held my hand, his voice trembling. Why? I took his hand and placed it on my lower right abdomen, where there was a shallow scar. His body trembled. I looked at him. Why? I sent you a message that day saying that I was going to have an operation, but you didn't reply to me and instead went to pick up Miriam. You were holding her and knocked someone down in the hospital. That person was me. 1 week after I was discharged from the hospital, you brought your first love back home, didn't believe me, and abandoned me. It was on that day that I was completely disappointed in you. But I was afraid that I would regret it, so I gave you 3 more chances. Victor, you didn't cherish those 3 chances. So how could I possibly give you another chance and let you hurt me again? He looked at me painfully, with tears streaming down from the corners of his eyes. I didn't know. That's not an excuse for you. So, Victor, I'll never look back and never forgive you. 21 Of course, Victor didn't listen. After a period of silence, he started to court me again. I went abroad to collect materials for photography. He didn't even care about his company and followed me. I ignored him, but he wasn't annoyed. He just watched me from a distance. That day, after I finished my trip, I was going to do what I usually did, strolling around and buying some interesting things to take back. I didn't pay attention to the time. And Paris is famous for being a city with a lot of thieves. I had my camera snatched away directly in an alley. That camera was more important to me than my life. When I was about to chase after them, another group of people appeared behind me. I didn't notice that they were holding knives. Before I could react, a dark figure rushed in front of me and blocked their knives. I cursed loudly in French, saying that there were people with me and that we would catch them. Then they ran away. And Victor just fell in front of me while clutching his abdomen. I took him to the nearest hospital. After the dressing was done, Victor finally said, "Does this count as repaying you for the knife wound on your thigh?" I opened my mouth but didn't know what to say. "Could you pour me a glass of water?" Seeing that I didn't say anything, he asked. I got up and handed it to him. He smiled gently, but his lips were a bit pale. "I don't have the intention of morally blackmailing you. I just subconsciously wanted to protect you. I know that I've hurt your feelings many times. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I never thought that you would leave before. Clearly, you liked me so much, and clearly, I liked you too. How did we end up like this?" His voice choked up a bit. "Why did you suddenly disappear? Do you know how flustered I was when I went back home and saw that everything was clean and there was no trace of you? It was just like dividing property after a divorce. You took away all the things and didn't leave anything for me. I went to the bedroom and saw that you had torn up all the photos on our bedside table. At that time, my heart seemed to be torn apart too, and it hurt so much. I picked them up and glued them together. I was angry, upset, and flustered. I called you, and you said we should calm down for a while. I was almost going crazy. I'm not making excuses. I know that excuses are useless. You don't want to see me because the things I did were really hurtful. But I still want to say that I really didn't have other thoughts about Miriam. I don't know why I did those things either. Maybe it was because I was angry after quarreling with you, or maybe it was a rebellious mentality. Later, countless times, I wished I could kill myself. Why didn't I just hug you, kiss you, and believe you at that time? By the end of his words, tears welled up in the corners of his eyes. I turned my face away. You should have a rest first. I'll ask someone to take care of you. It's not appropriate for me to stay here. He grabbed my hand. Can you not leave? He looked at me so fixedly, it hurts a bit. Just stay with me for a while, okay? I slowly pulled my hand away. Victor, it's not a very serious wound. I lay in the hospital for a week by myself after the appendicitis operation and it was over. Hearing me mention this, his face turned a bit pale. I'm sorry. At that time? Yes, I understand. At that time, in your eyes, Miriam, whose hand was ruined because of you, was more important. You wanted to make it up to her. But these things have nothing to do with me anymore. Victor, you know what kind of person I am. I don't make decisions easily, but once I make a decision, nothing can change my mind. So breaking up wasn't just empty words. When I left that day, he was lying alone on the hospital bed, looking so lonely as if he had lost something most precious. 22 I went back to China first. Since I lost my camera, I had to start my journey again. So I hid my whereabouts and went to collect materials for photography again. This time I went to South America. I skied on the Alps, painted graffiti in Valparaiso. I went to see the most beautiful glaciers in El Calafate and felt the wind by the lake in Bariloche. At the last stop, I went to Tierra del Fuego, which is known as the real end of the world. Starting from the Strait of Magellan that I had memorized from geography textbooks, I felt the cold wind on the Deccanef, and under the gaze of the deep sea, I felt extremely tiny. When I arrived, all I saw was a desolate world. I lay on the desert and stared at the sky. At that moment, I felt extremely calm inside. I understood that there was bound to be a moon in life that couldn't be full. When we meet again, I hope the memories will be like spring after serving a prison sentence. 3 months later, I returned to China and still ran into Victor at the airport. He had come specifically to pick me up. I wasn't very resistant, nor did I have strong feelings. It seemed that he was just an insignificant person to me now. We didn't say a word all the way. When we arrived home, he put down my luggage and was about to leave quietly. I stopped him. Let's have a chat. His eyes lit up in an instant. We walked together in the garden of my house. During the 3 years we were together, it was the first time that we had such a good mood to walk side by side so calmly like this. When we walked to the swimming pool, I pointed and said, we met for the first time there. You saved me. Victor's family moved here when I was 14 years old. He was different from everyone in our neighborhood. He was mature beyond his years and always had a gloomy face. He was as arrogant as could be. But he had a fatal attraction for me at that time. It was my birthday that day, and I invited everyone over. But I accidentally fell into the swimming pool. Almost instantly, he jumped in and fished me out. At the age when my first love just began and I didn't understand anything, I fell in love with him hopelessly like that. I smiled and said, but you didn't like me, so I just watched you silently. When I was about to confess my love, you were with Miriam. But you broke up after a year and I thought my chance had come. So I frequently appeared in your life and finally won your heart. It wasn't about winning your heart. I didn't get together with you because I was moved, Victor explained nervously. But your heart was really hard to warm up. You were hot and cold towards me, kept me at arm's length, and always liked to mention breaking up. My heart was always on tenterhooks because of you. It was so torturous. Admittedly, you weren't completely bad to me, but for the relationship between us, I always had to deliberately recall the memories of when you were nice to me in order to keep it going. I don't like this feeling. Victor's eyes were already red. I noticed that his body was trembling slightly. Give me a chance to make up for it, Aubrey. We've been entangled for so many years. Don't leave easily, okay? I shook my head gently, looking at him, and there were no more ripples in my heart. I can love the wrong people 3 or 5 times, but I can't love the wrong person 3 or 5 times. Taking the wrong path might be due to bad luck, but always jumping into the same pit is just asking for it. The love I had for you over the years has finally been exhausted. He was on the verge of breaking down and wanted to hold my hand tightly. Don't be like this. Please don't be so cold. I won't make you sad anymore in the future and will create more beautiful memories for us, okay? I pulled my hand out of his and let the breeze blow. Victor, we met in Aubrey, and let's say goodbye in Aubrey. Some people and some things, perhaps it's best to end here. We had a brief encounter, and now the tide is ebbing. Let's pay tribute to this encounter. As I move forward, there will always be someone to accompany me. It's just not you anymore. I turned around, facing the scorching sun in summer, and walked to my mother's side. And Victor just stood there. After a while, he squatted on the ground and cried like a child. My mother said, "Regret is perhaps the norm in life." I nodded. I had let it go. On the road of life, we should wake up in time and be content with everything. Looking back, the light boat has already passed thousands of mountains. Looking forward, the long road is still bright.